My name is Rachel Thompson, and I'm the John Walsh Fellow in Museum Education at the Yale University Art Gallery. I teach learners of all ages in the museum, and I work with school groups and teachers who are connecting their classroom learning to the art on view in the gallery. When I'm teaching in the gallery, one strategy I use is pairing works of art with text to help students look more closely. I've found that bringing together visual art with language helps students notice more details of both the artwork and the text. I invite you to our 20th Century American Gallery to look at the work of Edward Hopper. We'll be looking closely at Hopper's 1951 painting, Rooms by the Sea. What do you notice? This painting reminds me of a poem I love by the American poet Emily Dickinson. I'm going to read the poem, and as I read, look closely at Hopper's painting and see what else you notice. There's a certain slant of light. Number 320. There's a certain slant of light, winter afternoons, that oppresses like the heft of cathedral tunes. Heavenly hurt it gives us, we can find no scar, but internal difference where the meanings are. None may teach it, any. 'Tis the seal despair, an imperial affliction sent us of the air. When it comes, the landscape listens, shadows hold their breath. When it goes, 'tis like the distance on the look of death. What did you notice as you looked and listened? I began to see the slant of light as a main character, an intruder of sorts, which oppresses and points to the internal difference that the poem speaks of. The light comes in, and the landscape, a still ocean under a cloudless sky, listens, and the shadows hold their breath as they wait for the sun to change position. This painting is loosely based on the interior of Hopper's home on Cape Cod, but furniture is missing, and the shapes the light and shadows cast on the wall are architecturally impossible. Hopper took great liberties in manipulating the space to achieve the geometry of the light in this painting. Rather than a literal depiction of his house, this painting serves as a sort of inner landscape of the artist's mind. Dickinson also created inner landscapes with her poetry, and we know from a diary entry from Hopper's wife, Jo, shown here in a photograph with Edward, that he was drawn to Dickinson's reclusive way of living and working, and that he admired how her poetry depicted ordinary New England life. Both Hopper and Dickinson were interested in light, evidenced here by the way the certain slant of light takes active agency in the poem, and by the prominence of the light on the canvas, in Rooms by the Sea and many of Hopper's other paintings. When teaching in the gallery, I could use this strategy of inviting students to listen to a poem while they look closely at a work of art to illustrate how both painters and poets are able to create mood, or the feeling the audience gets when they encounter the piece. For example, in the first lines of the poem, There's a certain slant of light, winter afternoons, the speaker reflects on the particularity of winter afternoon light, initially setting a mood that is pleasant and even sentimental. The mood changes sharply with the following lines, that oppresses like the heft of cathedral tunes, a change that resembles the discovery of the water immediately outside the door of this quiet interior, turning the mood suddenly ominous as the viewer notices the approaching sea. Thank you for joining me today to think about the relationship between images and poetry. Next time you're looking at an artwork, I invite you to look closely and consider how it might relate to a poem you love.